The shoot 'em up, one of the oldest genres in gaming history, established by Taito's 1978 arcade smash, Space Invaders, which in turn would inspire Atari and Namco to create Asteroids and Galaxian respectively. The genre would grow throughout the 80s, with games like R-Type 1942, Gradius and Darius wowing arcade gamers. As we moved into the 90s, the shoot 'em up genre would evolve, with waves of enemies and their relatively low bullet counts being replaced by something more challenging. Yes, we'd entered the era of bullet hell, and the shmup was born, with the general consensus that 1993's Batsugun is considered pivotal in the creation of the bullet hell subgenre. And, in a way, that's a great segue to the topic of this video, because Sega Saturn would prove to be bullet hell and shoot 'em up fans' dream console, especially in Japan. I'm James, the SEGAHolic, one half of the Sega guys, and in this video I'm going to count down the top 10 Sega Saturn shooters. Tsukiyo's 1995 arcade release was ported to the Sega Saturn by Atlus in 1996, hitting Japanese shelves in June of that year. I've got something of a soft spot for this one, as it reminds me a lot of Capcom's 1942, which I first played on the ZX Spectrum back in the 80s. In Striker's 1945, your chosen plane has 3 attacks to choose from: a standard shot, a charged shot, and a bomb which destroys all enemies and bullets on screen at the time. Set after the end of World War II, you battle against a new threat, the CANY. The 6 best fighter pilots in the world have been hired by the United Military HQ to form the elite team called Strikers. In a bizarre plot twist, it turns out that the CANY are actually aliens out to take over the world. This one was only released in Japan on the Saturn, but the good news is that the game has a port on both the App Store and Google Play. Accepted by many to be the origin of bullet hell, Toplan's Batsugun hit arcades across the world in December of 1993. Taking on the role of one of 6 Skull Hornet pilots, you take on waves of enemies in your submersible jet. The game features 6 pilots, split into 2 groups between Player 1 and Player 2. The submersibles have 3 classes, A, B and C. Type A jets have a standard pattern laser fire, Type B jets shoot a straight beam of lightning, while Type Cs are a mixture of the two. Tap the shoot button for projectile laser fire, while holding fire results in straight shots of energy waves. Following Toplan's bankruptcy in 1994, several of their team went on to create household names including Rising, Takumi Corporation, Gazelle and Cave. Gazelle would port Batsugun to the Saturn, releasing in October of 1996, and would never make it out of Japan. The Saturn version also offers the original and an arranged soundtrack, and also includes a special version of the game. This features bombs which cover larger areas of the screen, smaller hitboxes for the player's jets, increased difficulty and more. Batsugun would be included on Sega's Astro City Mini V cabinet, with the Saturn version ported to PS4, Xbox One, Switch and PC under the title of Batsugun Saturn Tribute Boosted. Released in arcades in February 1997, DoDonPachi was developed by Cave and published by Atlus, before being ported to Sega Saturn in September of the same year. And, once again, this one would never leave Japan. Again, you take on the role of a fighter pilot out to save the world, this time from a race of mechanised aliens. Gameplay wise, the ships can be played in shot or laser mode, with 3 crafts for players to choose from. Each ship has a standard fire and 2 floating guns either side, which fire in a set pattern depending on the type of craft chose. Hold in the fire button and all 3 weapons combine to form a single destructive laser beam. Shot mode increases the spread and range of standard shots, doubling basic firepower. The laser mode increases the power of the laser, destroying multiple enemy types, providing the players with a shield against certain enemies while firing the laser. And as is standard fare for shmups, Players also have a limited number of bombs, with floating P icons on screen making the player's guns and lasers thicker and more powerful. DoDonPachi has a deep scoring system, but in terms of sheer fun, it's got some of the best explosive sound effects of any shmup, making it insanely enjoyable. The first horizontal entry, Taito's Darius Gaiden, first graced arcades in late 1994, and is a direct sequel to Darius 2, which itself was ported to the Mega Drive in 1990. The Saturn port of Gaiden hit Japanese shelves in December 1995, and is the first of only 2 games on this list to receive a Western release, published by Acclaim. Considered an easier game than Darius 2, Gaiden adds bomb attacks which act as black holes, damaging enemies and absorbing projectiles on the screen. If the player chooses not to use the black hole bombs, they receive a score bonus, which in itself is tied to not using any continues. Piloting the Silverhawk, players in Darius Gaiden can plot their path through the game's 27 stages, but you can only play any 7 of them at a time. This offers a degree of variety, while a second player is able to join the action at any time. The Silverhawk begins the game with a single forward-facing laser, but by collecting emblems you can upgrade your arsenal. Green emblems give you missiles, blue emblems grant a shield, and red emblems increase your laser's power. The Saturn port was lauded in Japan for its faithful conversion, selling over 70,000 copies in Japan alone, and is rightly considered one of the best side-scrolling shooters ever made. Sekio's Sengoku Blade released in Japanese arcades in 1996 and is a direct sequel to 1993's Sengoku Ace. It was ported to the SEGA Saturn later in 1996 and comes with a second bonus disc loaded with exclusive artwork. The characters were designed by famous Japanese artist Tsukasa Jun, who at the time of the game's release was considered something of an underground artist. What strikes you straight away about Sengoku Blade is the art style rooted in feudal Japan. From the backgrounds to the buildings to the enemies on screen, the visuals have a habit of making your eyes wander to appreciate them. There are 5 characters to choose from at the start of the game, and another 2 can be unlocked as you seek to rescue the Shogun's daughter, who has been kidnapped by the evil Shinrano cult. Gameplay wise, it's standard fare for a horizontal shooter, with basic fire, charged shots, bonus power-ups and collectible coins for score bonuses. As with most games on this list, it never seen a Saturn release outside of Japan. It was finally released in the West in August 2022, coming to both Xbox One and PlayStation 4 under the title of Tengai, the name of the main character in the game. Released on SEGA Saturn on July of 1997 and coming to Sony's PlayStation in May of the following year, Technosoft's Thunder Force 5 is a 2.5D shooter with 3D polygonal enemies and environments played out on a 2D plane. Your ship has 5 weapon types, with their execution dependent on the type of mode you choose. Select mode allows you to switch out weapons using the L and R shoulder buttons, while direct mode assigns a weapon type to A, B, C, X and Y. Like its predecessor, your ship in Thunder Force 5 is equipped with a special weapon called the Craw, which grants additional firepower and absorbs enemy hits. The Craw can be used with the player's currently equipped weapon class, forming what's called the Overweapon, and can be used for a limited time period before it returns to its standard form. Performance wise, there is noticeable slowdown on screen when larger polygonal enemies appear, but don't let that detract you from what is a fantastic shooter with an absolutely brilliant soundtrack. Thunder Force 5 would see a North American release on PlayStation in November of 1998, but Saturn owners in the West once again were left out. Another Technosoft entry, Blastwind returns to the traditional 2D vertical scrolling shooter format, as players take on the role of Kyo or Form to take down the evil society known as Gorn. Blastwind at a glance may look like just another generic shooter, but it hides a clever gameplay mechanic within its levels. You see, while you take on hordes of enemies, dodge their bullets, there are blocks which can be literally pushed by your ship, acting as buttons. These buttons alter the direction and path of the stage, but can also impact the end of stage boss battle or their attack method. As with other shooters, floating power-ups tempt the player, and include power-ups which fire out a bolt of lightning either side of your ship for a brief period, wiping out anything and everything in its path. You also have a shield ball which absorbs enemy bullets, the traditional bomb attack activated by pressing the C button, and 3 levels of score bonus donated by a dollar symbol, a gold star medal, and what appears to be some kind of red gem. Blastwind was developed as an arcade title in 1993, but dramatically failed in its location test, missing its intended launch date. In 1994, the game was reworked and released again for location testing, this time under the title of Inazuma Saber. The reworking of the game seen a more comedic tone between player characters, but it too failed its location test and was never released. It wouldn't be until 1997 that Technosoft would revisit Blastwind and port it to the Saturn, again only ever seeing the light of day in Japan and produced in limited numbers. Thanks to the wonders of ODEs, however, these games have never been more accessible to the Saturn community, and if you've never tried Blastwind before, it's one that I highly recommend. One of my favourite Saturn titles, Success's Cotton 2 hides a mean shooter beneath its charming visuals. Taking on the role of either Cotton or Apley, you must retrieve the Water Willow and return it to the Pumpkin Kingdom. As I said, the whole premise sounds very cute and cuddly, but when you start playing Cotton 2, you discover that it has a lot of depth. The A button fires your standard weapon, while holding A allows you to move around screen faster but disables your ability to shoot. The B button acts as a grab button, allowing you to, yes, grab enemies and throw them back at the wave, causing further damage. The C button will use your character's magic ability, which is powered by crystals collected from fallen enemies. Each colour of crystal corresponds to a type of attack: red for fire, green for wind, and blue for ice. The last colour of crystal you collect will impact both the standard weapon and the magic attack available to the player. In a clever twist, however, players can determine which attack style they want by shooting the crystals before collecting them, changing their colour. As with all shooters, Cotton 2 features end of level boss battles. However, unlike most shooters, these boss battles are timed. This means that regardless of the player beating them or not, you'll progress to the next stage, so it's more a case of win or survive rather than win or lose. Cotton 2 was released in Japanese arcades in November 1997 and runs on the Sega Titan Video arcade board, meaning a port to Saturn was all but inevitable. And sure enough, 1 month later, the game came to Sega Saturn. The home version features a special Saturn mode with different stage designs and enemy wave patterns. While the game was relatively easy to pick up and play to non-Japanese speaking players, the story element of Cotton 2 was lost. Thankfully, in March 2021, a fully translated English patch was released for Cotton 2, meaning there's never been a better time than now to experience it in full. This one appearing at number 2 may shock a lot of people. Another Sega Titan Video arcade game, Radiant Silvergun hit Japanese arcades in May of 1998 before coming to Saturn just 2 months later. As you'd expect from an STV port, the game is arcade perfect on Saturn and looks absolutely gorgeous. Gameplay wise, Radiant Silvergun gives players no less than 7 weapons to choose from, with the weapon fired dependent on the combination of buttons pressed. And when I say 7 weapons to choose from, I mean straight away. Yep, you start the game with access to the Vulcan cannon, the homing laser, side bombs, rear Vulcans, lightning beams, homing missiles and the radiant sword. The scoring system encourages the chaining of enemies of the same colour, red, blue or yellow. Score chains based on enemy colour is a trait that Treasure would retain, but simplify in the sequel Ikaruga. Stages in the game are played out in order of the story, Arcade mode will begin on stage 3, at the end of which players can choose to move on to stage 2 or stage 4, both of which when completed will progress the player to stage 5 then 6. Saturn mode, however, forces players to play each stage in turn. Additionally, the Saturn mode also features cutscenes and dialogue to tell the story. Boss battles in Radiant Silvergun are more complex than most shooters of the era, with each boss having sections or appendages which need to be destroyed and removed to expose the weak point. Radiant Silvergun is possibly the deepest shooter on this list, even more so than the aforementioned Cotton 2. With its gorgeous visuals, fantastic soundtrack, addictive gameplay and a plethora of weapons and power-ups, all of which are available straight away to the player, it can be overwhelming for new players, but rewarding once everything clicks. If you thought Blastwind had a complex history when it came to its name, you've heard nothing yet. Released in Japanese arcades in 1994 by Taito under the name of Rayforce, it would go by the name of Gunlock when released in Europe. When the game was ported to the Sega Saturn in September of 1995, it was renamed to Lair Section, allegedly due to copyright issues. When Acclaim picked up the publishing rights for Lair Section in the West, it was renamed again to Galactic Attack. To me though, the game will always be Lair Section, so that's how I'll refer to it for the rest of the video. Gameplay in Lair Section seems standard fare at first for a shooter, but includes an ingenious secondary lock-on weapon that helps add to the player's score. As you move your craft around the screen, you will notice a targeting reticle scan the environment. Enemies in the immediate foreground can be dispatched with the standard laser, which itself can be powered up via on-screen collectibles, but enemies in the background are picked up by the lock-on weapon as you move the reticle over them. The lock-on weapon can target a maximum of 8 enemies at once, and unlike most of the shmups on this list, Lair Section does not include any kind of smart bomb weapon, a design choice made by director Tetsuya Nakamura, who along with his team wanted to return the game to a more traditional shooter where such weapons weren't included. While reading reviews of Lair Section during the making of this video, I found it interesting that some reviews chose to label Lair Section as retro, with Maximum's review acknowledging the fun aspect of the game, but noting that it was released alongside the likes of Virtua Fighter 2 and Sega Rally, with the reviewer asking readers, is this really the sort of game you coughed up £300 to play on your high-tech next-generation gaming system? Regardless, Lair Section's visuals are a treat. The level of depth to each stage is staggering, with enemy ships, turrets and meteors to contend with. The pace and direction of scrolling in stages also varies, with one of my favourite stages being a battle across a Mars-like planet surface, only for the screen to scroll to the left and reveal an Earth-like planet in the background, under siege from a fleet of enemy ships that can only be targeted with the lock-on weapon. The Saturn version also includes an option to play the game vertically, as long as you have a monitor that rotates or you don't mind putting your CRT on its side. This list changed order several times during the making of this video, and whittling down all of the Saturn shooters to just 10 was incredibly hard. There may well be people asking where Metal Slug is, or where Silhouette Mirage is, but I wanted to keep this to more traditional on-rail style shooters and shmups. The one constant though was Lair Section at number 1. Its charming but detailed visuals, soothing soundtrack and addictive gameplay that sees you take on enemies via 2 layers make this a standout. So there we have it, my top 10 Sega Saturn shooters. If you've made it to the end, thanks as always for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and you're new to the channel, why not drop us a like or a subscribe? Or look around the rest of the content, there's plenty of Sega goodness to go around. So what are your top 10 Saturn shooters? Are there any of mine that you'd swap out from the list for your own? Let us know in the comments below. If you're on socials and want to say hi, you can find me at the SEGAHolic. You can find my good friend and Sega Guys co-host Dan the Mega Driver at Swooper_D, and the channel account is of course at Sega Guys. Until next time, take care and we'll see you on the Sega side.